Ladies and gentlemen, as you're all probably familiar, Phrolova's drip marketing is out, but this video isn't really going to be centered on the drip marketing of the unit, her character kit, speculation, all of that. It's going to be about the drama that a release like hers is bringing to the game. As we're all familiar, based off of her story involvement, Phrolova is a member of Fractsidus. And one thing for certain about Fractsidus is that they are kind of viewed as evildoers. They are viewed in a sense as villains in the story, because we go ahead and let's just be honest here, ladies and gentlemen. One thing for certain about Fractsidus is that they appear as enemies in the game. They are enemies that we typically fight against. They're enemies that can, you know, in the overworld actually kill us, and we grind them for materials. And this is the thing when it comes to their story implementation. There are a lot of people that are concerned about the potential future of Phrolova, knowing that Fractsidus is meant to be like an enemy organization, and they think that Kuro Games is kind of just gonna go ahead, give her like a change of heart, kind of like, I'm not sure if it's the right word to use, like purify her motivations and make her like a goody old little two shoes in the eyes of the rover, and kind of like break down all the characterization that she has. And this is the thing. I think that this post by Marco de Meatball way back on June 7th, about a week and a half ago, is kind of like what kicked off a lot of this dialogue. How did he know she was going to be drip marketed? Wink, wink. I've been thinking about Wuthering Waves and Phrolova becoming playable. If she has a change of heart and her character moves completely from being a villain, that's it for me. I think he's being a little bit dramatic. Guys, he's a self-professed theater kid. Let's just keep that in mind. If she's morally gray or questionable, then I'm okay with it. I'm just deeply concerned they're going to justify spending on characters by having them have changes of hearts, which is going to dumb down and homogenize this game massively and not have any stakes attached. So I can understand what he's talking about from the perspective of she would lose a lot of characterization as like a villain who's committed a lot of crimes and caused a lot of strife. But I don't think that one character changing their motivations or, you know, actually having the truth of like their goodness revealed completely homogenizes the game, dumbs it down, and then also removes all the stakes attached, because it's not like every single character that's actually evil is going to end up turning good. So again, I do think this is dramatized a little bit, but there are some decent points over here. So let's get into the actual decent points. She's a great villain. I really don't want her to have some tragic backstory that made her evil, but then she realizes the error of her ways. It will feel so cheap, and no matter how much love I have in my heart for this game, I just won't keep playing it. Okay, like, okay, dude. Like, okay, man. So I agree with the whole it will feel cheap part, because, you know, that is like a little bit of like a Deus Ex Machina, but like we're doing a little bit much here, right? So I think that this is like a bit of an over dramatized statement. I think that his points are still pretty legitimate, still pretty valid, but it's fair to say that there was quite a bit of drama that came out as a result of this, right? Where people are just like, is this really worth like quitting the game over? Is this really like something that's going to be that bad? I heard China has a law where playable characters aren't allowed to be evil. They actually had to be good. And that discussion has spread even further, right? There are more and more content creators for the game actually having similar sort of takes. Not as dramatized, but similar sort of takes. I'm so nervous, Lena Sarah says. How she's handled is going to say a lot about how playable antagonists are treated in the game. So it's important to keep in mind that Phrolova is meant to be the first sort of playable antagonist, though I will be honest, a lot of people could also view Camellia as the first actual playable antagonist, and it's pretty clear to a lot of people already that Camellia, the unit that appears to be absolutely fucking insane, does enjoy Rover, but she kinda is like a villain in a lot of ways. Sure, right? She's ultimately working in the forces of good, but she is a bit of a freak, and this is the thing. If Camellia is ultimately working towards good, but she's crazy as hell and does villainous things in the process, and let me just, if some of you all need a refresher for what I'm saying, or you're like, oh, well, Camellia's a part of the Black Shores, so she's actually a complete hero. Let me show you all something about Camellia that you might have forgotten. This is Camellia's Resonator Showcase, ladies and gentlemen. Does that look like a hero to you? Does this look heroic?
Please.
Is it? Is it?
You shouldn't have shown fear.
Does that look heroic too? What about this part?
It's like there's nothing left. Entertain me.
Is that hero music, or is that like boss music? That doesn't sound like hero music to me. So I view Camellia as an example of a character where she's ultimately working towards good by serving on the Black Shores, which is, you know, an organization that's trying to save the world. That's actually their lore. They're trying to save the world. But she clearly does it in a somewhat villainous sort of way. And that, to me, represents a pretty morally gray character. And then we find out during her story quest, it's because she's literally brain damaged after years of, like, you know, like overclocking. Like, Camellia is, in a lot of ways, actually brain damaged in lore. And so that's the explanation for why she is the way that she is. And one thing we know for certain, based off of the lore tidbits we've gotten from Phrolova, is that she carries an endless sadness that envelops everyone around her, being silent and somber. And then she bridges the gap between life and death, crafting an ideal world within her heart. And so this is basically a clue that she has a pretty tragic backstory, and the actions that she's taking are meant to go ahead and create some sort of ideal future based off the prior experiences that she's had in the past. And what I view her as is a unit, is a character with a story progression, right? Or a motivation that's going to be focused on the ends justify the means. Anything is possible. Anything is justified, as long as this ideal future of, like, peace, or this ideal future that's, like, ultimately good actually occurs. And one character that you're all pretty familiar with that I might actually relate her to is Thanos, right? Thanos from Marvel, Endgame, Infinity War, that sort of stuff. Thanos isn't actually a pure villain. He's more of like a, I mean, it would be a stretch to call him an anti-hero, but he's not necessarily a pure villain, right? Where his goal of exterminating 50% of the population is to, you know, do things like control hunger, end wars, do all of that. And obviously, he does a lot of very villainous things in the process to make all of that happen. But at the end of the day, his ultimate goal isn't necessarily pure evil. And somebody's gone ahead and they compiled a list of all the evil things that Phrolova has done. And so what I wanted to do is actually go into all of these different things, right? And then talk about the sort of like flip side to them. Because for every action, there's a reaction. Crime 1, incitement of war via flooding Jinzhou's northern area with tacit discords, thus speedrunning the revival of the Thenodian Overthrax. Right? This is clearly a crime, right? That's going to kill some people, cause some problems. But it gives Rover motivation to continue on their quest. It gives them, like, a goal to actually solve. It gives them a reason, right? To continue going around and, like, solving a mystery. Because they just spawned into the world with amnesia, and now they have more of a purpose. Before, they would be aimless if there weren't actually any problems to look at. Now we got Crime 2, involvement with the Order in Raguna, likely for reasons involving the Thenodian Leviathan and tampering of tacit discords during the Carnival. Notable TDs include Cetus, Lorelei, all of that. A, more and more plot progression, right? More of a reason to explore certain parts about Raguna, more reason to explore and dive into different TDs and build relationships, right? Because, think about it this way, guys. Her role is the conductor. She leads the notes of melody. She's making the story that Cristoforo wrote actually happen. And who knows, right? If we would have been able to find out things about the Phassalias. Who knows we would have been able to find out how evil the Order actually is if these issues didn't actually happen. It's safe to say that the Order has had control over Raguna and would have maintained control over Raguna for an extended period of time if the issues never actually exploded and became bigger ones. Isn't it true that the Carnival had been canceled for many years prior because of the influence of the Order? And because of Phrolova, the Carnival actually happened again. And that's what led to the ultimate dismantling of the order in Raguna, right? And so if Phrolova never actually did any of these things, the plot of 2.0 would have never happened, and the Order would still be sending these people on pilgrimages and stuff. And this is the other thing, guys. Cartithia would still be stuck in the tower. There would be no way for Cartithia to have escaped the inverted tower if none of this stuff happened. So, in a sense, Phrolova is why Cartithia has a real body now. But she did all these evil things, but did she do it for an ultimately evil goal? Huh. Crime 3, willful tampering of Raguna's echoes via distribution of research samples of her forte ability. Who knows if we would have been able to bring Carlotta into this situation? Would the Montellis have cared as much about what was going on if they didn't have a direct link to this whole Licorice thing happening, right? This now gives the Montellis, Carlotta, their resources, their influence, a bigger reason to get involved because they're getting shit on. They're getting screwed with. And so now they have like a much bigger motivation to carry through the entire, to carry through and actually stick with the plot of 2.0 instead of who knows if they would have gotten involved in the first place if their echoes weren't the ones getting tampered with. And so is this Phrolova knowing that the Montellis have a shit ton of resources? Is it her knowing that there are rats in the Montelli family and actually helping expose them so that the Montelli family can actually plug up all the holes that they have? Because right now, after the plot of 2.0 and the plot of Carlotta's story quest, which is kicked off by this, the Montelli family is basically as loyal as it can possibly be, because all of those rats have been exposed and exterminated across that plotline. Crime 4, allegedly encouraging Primus Fenrico's increasingly dangerous actions towards Raguna's populace via her 3 prophecies since he rose to office. Hey, we know the Order took control, right? And we also know the Order is doing things like sending people on fool's pilgrimages, killing them, right? We find out in the 2.4 quest, they like lit a boat on fire because they didn't like poems. They were hiding the truth about the Sentinel, and they would have been able to keep doing it if they had kept their actions more low-key. The Order's been doing evil stuff the entire time. Is it that bad to make them do slightly more evil things so that they get exposed and then dismantled? Isn't a more silent, insidious, behind-the-scenes evil for a very long, extended period of time? Isn't that actually a little bit worse than a couple moments of heightened evil that can get noticed, and then after that gets noticed, it gets brought to light and then resolved? I don't know. I really do think Phrolova taking on this role of a conductor, right? And then magnifying an issue. Yes, on the surface, it appears that she's making things worse. But if she didn't make these things worse, would they have ever been noticed? Because the only reason, right, that we get an invitation to Raguna in the first place from Carlotta is because of all the crazy shit going on. The Carnival would have never happened without Phrolova. The Montellis would have never gotten involved if their echoes weren't getting fucked with by Phrolova. And can we deal with the issue of the Carnival without Carlotta? I don't know. I don't think so. And then Phrolova, I think this is one of the major pieces, right, that isn't necessarily mentioned here. She willingly takes on the role of the Demon Queen in the play. One thing about a play is that your actors usually have to be there by their own consent. And Phrolova knows entirely that Brant, the Fool's Troop, Rosia, Carlotta, they're all approaching this as like a play for the purpose of the Carnival to make sure that like the public people are like all aligned. She aids in the theatrics, and then she like willingly, right, is a part of the entire sequence. She could have just decided not to play along, right? And then, like, you know, did a bunch of, like, evil things to the population. But she decides to take on the role of this demon queen and basically work alongside Rover in this plan that they've conjured up. And as a result, right, they're crowned as the laureate. They become a big influence in Raguna, and we use this title of the laureate throughout the entire Raguna arc to be able to get to certain places, to be able to, like, influence the population, to be able to, you know, build a relationship with like Cartithia and build a relationship with what's her name, Cantarella as well. And that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. When you look at all of Phrolova's actions as individual pieces, Yes, she clearly appears evil because she's technically doing evil things, but when you look at the entire plot as a whole, you'll realize that none of the good things that happen in the plot would have ever been able to occur without her. And so this is what I mean by Phrolova being this ends justifies the means sort of character, where she's willing to get her hands dirty. She's willing to get into the mud, cause some issues, as long as the ultimate end goal, which is in a lot of what I would consider, what I'm thinking is actually good, actually happen. Because we've taken a look at all the evidence, right? We've taken a look at all the glue. We've taken a look at all these supposedly evil things she's done. But isn't there something good that's happened as a result of all of these? True, right? True. Something good has happened as a result of all of these. So yeah, without Phrolova, the Order is still ruling Renacida, or the Order is still ruling Raguna. People are still getting sent on pilgrimages. Cartithia is still stuck in the tower, and she's still holding off the Dark Tide. Maybe Cartithia actually succumbs to the Dark Tide without Phrolova, because she's been battling for 20 plus years, and she just can't handle it anymore. She eventually succumbs, and then the Dark Tide arrives in full force, and then just absolutely destroys Raguna. But Phrolova causing all these issues, actually getting the Carnival to happen, getting the Laureate crowned in Rover, who knows if another Laureate ever gets crowned in 2.0? Who knows if this ceremony actually happens if Phrolova doesn't kick all of these things off. And without the Laureate, ladies and gentlemen, Cartithia can never communicate with anybody. Did you think about it that way? Yeah, you need to be crowned by the Sentinel, you need to be crowned by Imperator to be able to communicate with Cartithia telepathically. And that is what triggered that entire situation. So yeah, I mean, hey. So that's why, ladies and gentlemen, I think that ultimately, this could be a bit of an overreaction, right? I don't think she's evil. I think she does evil things for a greater purpose. And we've gone through all of those different plot points. We've gone through all of those different crimes. And we've laid out how they've all been for a greater purpose. And that purpose is actually good. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully that lore overview, that theory crafting, that cooking on my end, I promise I'm not a Kuro employee, that cooking on my end has illuminated a bit of light in this whole Phrolova drama that's happening. Because she is morally questionable for sure, but I don't think she's evil. And I don't think the Fraxidus organization as a whole is necessarily evil either. They're just willing to do evil things to make an ultimate goal, which might be considered good, actually happen. So with that, peace out.